Hello and welcome to the last of these videos. This is just going to be a quick skim through what is a very common mastering chain for me. I'm very much a paid up member of the Church of Templates. I like a mix template. My mix template that you saw in that series of videos on the mix is something I've been developing for 15 years. Just it's built up and built up and built up and built up, and I load the songs into my template. I have that much faith and belief in my template. It speeds up my workflow just immeasurably, and I feel the same about mastering as well. I mean, I've got a series of plugins that have been designed in a particular order to work a few tricks in similar ways that I've seen real hardware units being used in mastering studios when I've sat in with bands, gone along for the ride to mastering studios a number of times just to get an eye in on what goes on. I do master. I do charge for mastering. I very rarely nowadays master my own material, and I've quite often said, if you've been in any of my classes, that I don't recommend it, and I don't recommend it. It's very difficult to get a true perspective of what you're doing if you're too close to the mix. Enough time had passed between the second mix of this song and the release. I was able to sort of come back to it with a fresh perspective and almost master it as if I hadn't mixed it myself, but with a very clear picture on what we needed to do. And I was, most of the mastering I do actually is fairly subtle. I don't think I have the right to shape or reshape the mix engineer's view on this. I just want to make it as loud and impactful as possible without changing the characteristic of the mix. Sometimes you need to repair in mastering, but on the whole, I think you're better off trying to be ghostly and just make it loud without it, without showing your workings. So let's have a quick look at the chain. I mean, you can see in here there are 3 songs loaded. This was part of a 3 track recording session. They're going to be released in subsequent singles, so you will get to hear these 2 songs in the future if you like this band. I'm hoping that they release them soon. They're both great. Future and Goldfish were both great tracks as well. This is Feed My Brain. What you can see is that there is a feed to the lexicon from this dry signal, first and foremost. The point of that is that I'm adding a reverb to the whole mix. It's part of a gluing process that I've seen in use in studios. I'm using a mastering preset, which is a very short decay time and a tiny bit of pre-delay. And I can play you what it sounds like actually. Hang on. Hang on. Let's find a section of the song first. I haven't set that up, I don't believe. Yeah, I did. There it is again. There's that song. So you can hear the reverb on it is really short. But what it adds is a kind of a sheen and a high frequency. There's quite a lot more high frequencies in this than there are low frequencies, so it's just adding a sheen to the top, a shine to the whole mix. It's being sent from the original before all the leveling, processing, the compression and whatnot, and EQing, because I want the loud sections to have more of the sheen on it and the quiet sections to have less. So if I do that before the mastering process, it's going to have a little more dynamic feed into this mix. That just means that in the big sections you get more of the sheen, so it cuts through a bit better, and in the quiet sections it doesn't sound so wet. Anyway, let's have a quick look at the mastering chain. I don't want to be here too long because it's a plug-in show-off session really, but just so you have an idea of what goes into it. I'm doing basic EQing and compression just a number of times. One of the biggest penny drops that not penny drops, no, one of the greatest revelations that I've been witness to sitting in on mastering sessions was the fact that mastering engineers tend to not use one unit to do any heavy lifting. They will stack. they will use a series of compressors. They will use a series of EQs. I've sat in one studio where a particular engineer, and I'm sort of using a form of this technique, will with one EQ boost the low energy, feed that into a compressor where the compressor then tackles that low energy first, then pushes that signal into a mid band, and then compresses that, and then into a high band EQ, and it creates this kind of multi-band, multi-layered compression scenario. The first thing I add is a tape simulator. This is just to add a little bit of, it's a very subtle kind of gluing together of the whole track. Let me let you hear what this sounds like. I'll turn this reverb off for the time being. This is, that's off. And you can hear straight away it's adding a little bit of sheen to the high, I keep saying sheen, it's adding some excitement and saturation to the high frequencies. Okay, then I've got a UAD emulation. That's a UAD plugin, by the way. This is also a UAD plugin. This was designed by Softtube. This is an emulation of an EQ that I would love to buy for real, but they're about $3.5 grand. It's a mastering EQ called the Curve Bender, and it's modelled on an original Abbey Road EQ. It is just beautiful. I use this to initially create some shape. I love the low end on this, so I'm boosting the low end here quite dramatically, 2 dB on the mix. That seems quite extreme, but it's designed to be boosted into some compression, so the compression then picks it up. There's also a boost at 6.5K to add a little bit of excitement at the top end of the guitars. There's a little boost at 800 to bring the bass out, and then a bit of shelf, 12K shelf, just to add a bit of lightness up top. Here's this going on. Again, just adding some excitement up top. There's another EQ in line here. This is a Brainworks model of another hardware mid-side EQ. So this one I'm just trying to increase the differences in the left and right image. So this is showing me the graphic of what I'm doing to the middle section, the mono section, and then this is the stereo section here. So just creating some differences. I've done a little peak here at 94 Hertz to boost the kick punch, and then another one, subsequent one at that looks a little higher up at 235. That's just to boost I think I can just click on this. You can hear where they are. They're just boosting the kick and snare sounds. So that's just picking up the harmonics and the nodes in the kick and boosting those, and the same with the snare. There's a little boost in the mid-range. There's a little cut in the vocal, in that whiny kind of high-frequency baby crying range, and a further boost, further shelf boost. Actually, no, it's not a shelf boost. That's just another presence boost at 2.5. On the sides, boosting the guitars. It's this one here. That sort of zone, just to give that some extension out in the wides. Okay, I'm doing nothing. This one's boosting a little further up in that sort of range. That's again trying to find some guitar energy and drag it out wide a bit. Drag it out. With. And then a little boost here. Just again, a little boost out wide. Then it hits a multi-band compressor. And this is where that real heavy boost that I've added to the lows is compensated for. I'm adding more here, but I've set it to trap it short. So ARRTing the ARRT compression method on just this low band here. So this is just creating this very punchy low frequency thump. I'll undo this, and I'll introduce these bands one at a time so that you can hear them working. So that's just creating a real snappiness to the low band, just this set of frequencies. Okay, then I'm adding a similar thing to slightly lesser degree the low mids, this range. I always sort of make sure in this range I can hear kick and snare. You'll probably hear some low end of the vocals and obviously the bass in there, but that's just taming that area. This is only by a dB or so. This is doing not a lot amount of work. That move here is a boost of a dB. This is again similar job in the mid range and then the upper mids, and this is a de-esser on the track up in the highs. Giving it a little boost before I let it do the cuts, so any attack that goes through is slightly boosted and then it cuts it afterwards, any sustains, any whining. This plugin from UAD, surprise surprise, is the Sonox Oxford Inflator. This is, I don't even really know how to describe this. This is just an aural exciter. It just adds a tone to things, and especially in guitar music and very sort of edgy synth music. It just does an amazing trick. Let's listen to it off first and then I'll switch it on. I'll just even that level out so you can hear this working at 0 at first, and I'll put it back to the -3 setting. That's off. Okay, so what I've done is I have, in the previous plugin, in the multiband compressor, I've taken some of the high information out and I'm adding it back in with the Oxford plug. Just some excitement in that zone with this exciter. That then goes into another EQ. This particular EQ I love to use to add sub information, which this black dial does, and this is a 40k boost. It just adds an air and a presence and a shine to the top of the mix that nothing else that I know matches. So once I've got these high frequencies tamed and under control here, I'm able to kind of then stretch and extend out the high frequency feel of the whole mix. It's almost as if this just raises the ceiling on things. It always feels like you're just lifting a blanket off as soon as I put this EQ on in this mode. Okay, and then this is an active EQ that I've been experimenting with for some while now. It's a tilt EQ, which are normally passive in the real world. It just means that the whole thing moves in this way, where you boost the highs and the lows. So as you dip the highs, the lows boost, so you kind of tilt it. This is an active tilt. I've got this working so it's listening and kind of trying to keep that tilt actively level. There's also where I've put my final high passes before I hit my... So there's a separate high pass for the mids. And one for the sides. Set a little higher. I'm just shelving, just high passing them at different stages. As you can see, that EQ is very active. It's working really subtly. It's quite slow. It kind of levels things out with this tilt EQ just to try and keep things a little less phasey. Okay, and then that goes into the final compressor stage, which is a Shadow Hills emulation. This one's from Plugin Alliance. UAD do a version of this. I just can't use it with the amount of other UAD plugins I'm running. This is two compressors in one. This is an optical compressor, which is this part up here, and then this discrete steel style hardware compression system here. This is working in series, and I have this so that this optical one feeds into this discrete compressor, and this dial shows you what this compressor is doing, and this dial shows you what this compressor is doing. Neither of these are doing a great deal. They're both just taking 1 or 2, well, no, actually half to 1 dB off of at any point in time. So you can see this in action. So you can see that they're working independently. This one is cropping it by a dB, and then this one cropping it by a further dB. So that's that second compressor off. That's the first one off. Okay, there we go. Right, so let's put the reverb back on. And that goes into the final stage. At all times though, I am checking this. I mean, the limiter is a limiter you've seen me use before. This is the one I use in mix, so I know that it's going to be doing a similar job. It's doing a lot less now because the chain up until this point is doing a lot more of the heavy lifting. So this is just taking the odd dB off. So this time that is very limit. It's taking 3 dB off of the very high peaks and giving a similar result. Alright, so there's one other plugin to mention in this chain, and actually two. Let me mention this. There's a website where you can check this, but this is a plugin version of made by the same company, and this is something that just allows you to listen and check that what you've done limiting wise is not going to affect the hang on one second, this isn't quite right now. I need to go here first, excuse me. That's why it's set at minus ridiculous or plus ridiculous. I need to send this to the print chain. So this is sent to this plugin, and this will tell me and show me and demonstrate how much YouTube, Spotify, Tidal, iTunes, etc., Amazon, Pandora and Deezer are going to change the volume and how it's going to be affected. So if I play now, you can see that it starts to recalculate. Reset. So I know that Spotify are going to reduce this by 2.6 dB, and I can listen to that. I can see the effect that it's going to have. iTunes are going to pull it by 5. What I know about iTunes is that they just pull it volume-wise. They don't compress. So I'm more concerned that 2.8 dB is going to come off with a compressor on Spotify, unless the end user is aware that they need to de-check that option. So I don't want additional compression added by Spotify. No thanks. I have a problem with them for that reason. Anyway, here's this adapter program again. All the way through this process, at every stage, adding all of these different parts of the chain, I'm checking this against the original mix at parity. So here's the original mix. First is the master. Just going to match the levels again. Here we go. A little bit duller. Looking to maintain a very similar fingerprint, but just brighten it up a little bit for the purposes of mastering. All right, that's the mastering chain. That's something I don't normally show people, and most people don't normally get to see. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's quite enough of this song, isn't it? Anyway, thanks to Igloo for allowing me to do this, and yeah, I'm looking forward to their further releases. Both Future and Goldfish are favourites of mine. I'm lucky enough to be able to listen to them in my car all the time. So anyway, thanks for hanging in there and enjoying, listening and watching this series of videos. For now, ta-ra.